You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Joins Avatar: The Last Airbender. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Dragonfire 217 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Katara stared at herself in the mirror for what felt like an hour, taking in the outfit she wore. The gray UA uniform that was sent to the home fit her body perfectly, the jacket contouring her shape down her sides. The skirt she could have gone without, but being school dress code, she figured not to argue it. The one thing that mattered the most to all of this was the fact it was a school uniform to the place she wanted to go. Hero School. She couldn't help but smile in amusement to hearing that. After simply doing the right thing where she came from, now she was going to a school to learn more about saving people and how to do it. Seems like it would be pretty obvious. She mumbled to herself as she grabbed her backpack and carried it out of her room. She entered the main hall and found Tenya already waiting for her by the door, poised and ready to go as he put his hands to his hips. Well, Katara, today is the day that we both join the ranks of other future heroes and learn how to become pros, he shouted out in glee as the waterbender chuckled at him. Yes, it's a big day for both of us. I am ready for this, too, she responded. Shall we get going? We do not want to be late on our first day. Yes, let's go. Wait. Both of them flipped around at the sudden call, and they were met with a bright flash catching them off guard. What the mother? Madoka was there with a camera in hand and a giant grin on her face. Oh, this is so exciting. My little baby and his friend have gotten into UA together, and in the same class as well. Katara sighed but smiled at the woman's happiness. Yeah, I feel a little better that I know at least one person in my class. Indeed, it is quite lucky we both are together. Tenya agreed. And we must get going. Mother, we should not be late for our first day. Well, that is why I am here. I will be driving you to school, Madoka cheered. Ooh, mother, it is quite all right. Tenya responded. We can get on the train quite quickly. Oh, nonsense. It's your first day, and I have to be on the road anyway. Besides, it will be much faster. Madoka held her finger up. And no exceptions. As she walked away, Katara raised an eyebrow at Tenya's deadpan face. She really is determined when something's on her mind, huh? The ride to UA in the car certainly was much faster than the walk, getting there in less than 10 minutes. Now Katara was a bit disappointed this couldn't be their way every day now, but would take what she could get. The large structure that was their school came into view as Madoka pulled along the curb with the other cars. Once she stopped, the elder woman looked back behind her, her eyes sparkling through her glasses. All right, you two, I hope you have a good day. Thank you, mother. Tenya responded and opened the car door. Yes, thank you. Katara nodded and followed Tenya out. Before she got all the way out, Madoka suddenly gasped. Oh, Katara, wait, I almost forgot. Huh, what is it? Katara watched as Madoka was digging through her purse, suddenly pulling out a small rectangular item. Her eyes widened when she realized what it was. Wait, is that? Yep, your own phone? Madoka smiled and held it out for her. Tensei bought it last night. In case there are emergencies and you need to get a hold of us. Katara was silent as she reached and pulled the phone towards herself. She had seen them use the phones on multiple occasions, but she herself had never really tested them out herself. She stared at the item a few moments, actually enjoying the way it fit into her hand perfectly. She smiled and gave a bow forward. Thank you so much. You are very welcome. Just keep it on you for when you need it. Plus, if there is a cute boy, don't forget to give him your number. Katara felt her cheeks warm as Madoka chuckled and gave a wink before driving off. She stood there phone in hand on the sidewalk, her eyes drifting down to the item she held. She sighed and slipped it in her pocket. Guess I'll have to figure this out soon. She turned behind her to the large school. the place that would be her place of study from now on. It was nothing to what she had ever expected she would be doing, although she never expected to end up in another world. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, not sure if she was prepared for what she was getting herself into, but now she would face it no matter what. "I'm ready for this," she sternly said to herself as she walked after Tenya into the school. The two of them walked down the large hallways into campus, Katara's eyes noticing the dozens of other students she passed by, staring at the many different kinds of people she was going to be in school with. She tried seeing if there was anyone else she had seen before, but so far none that she had seen during her entrance exam were here. After another minute or so, they came onto a giant door with a large one on the front of it. Tenya smiled and looked back towards her. "This is it, Katara. This is our class here." Katara nodded but never took her eyes off the massive door. "Why is this thing so big?" "Well, there are chances that there could be very large students that made it into UA, so they have to compensate." Not wanting to think much about it, she shrugged and watched as he opened the door to the class. It slid open, revealing the room they would call home for the next year. Inside there were already other students in their seats and talking among the others. Her eyes went around, noticing the blonde boy in front with a large tail coming out from behind him. Another. She wasn't sure since it was just a floating set of clothes seated down. That she would have to check out later for sure. She then turned and, "Oh wow, you are here." Katara yelped as a flash of pink hopped in front of her, the familiar yellow eyes filled with excitement. The waterbender sighed when she recognized who it was. "Hey Ishido, that's amazing you made it too. I'm glad." "I know, right? It's cool we are in the same class too," Mina responded happily. "And what about you? I saw you got the highest score in the entrance exams. That is unbelievable." "Thanks. I had no idea about those rescue points they gave out," Katara responded. "I saw you got some too for helping me in the end." "Yeah, but not much." Mina gave a small frown. "Probably took some points off for my little stunt." "Oh, I'm sure it wasn't that much." "Oh well, I'm here at least, and look who else got in as well." Mina smirked and pointed behind her. Katara looked past the pink girl and caught a glimpse of a familiar bird head sitting in the back. "Tokoyami is in here too?" she said with surprise. "Yeah, I saw with his rescue points and battle points he scored second." "Talk about some tough quirks in one class," Mina cheered. Tokoyami took notice of Katara looking at him, a small smirk forming on his beak as he nodded towards her. She followed suit and returned the gesture, a little happier to see a few familiar faces in her class at least. Her eyes then caught a glimpse of something behind Tokoyami, making her mind suddenly block out all other senses. "Wait, did I just?" she whispered internally as her head shifted to the left to get a better view, but when she did, she felt her heart stop when something from her past came in her line of sight. Her breath came in quick gasps as sweat began forming on her neck, her eyes locking onto the familiar scar that she had seen so many times on her friend and former enemy. "Zuko?" Mina tilted her head in confusion to the sudden change in Katara's persona. You okay?" The waterbender didn't even hear her as she stared at the boy in the back of the room. After a few moments she realized it wasn't her friend sitting there. His half-red and white hair hung like Zuko's, but he was shorter in height and eyes two different colors. But what shocked her was the familiar burn that was over the left eye, the same side as Zuko's. She was lucky he was looking elsewhere, for she couldn't take her eyes off of him. The only thing that broke her focus was the sudden snap in front of her face. "Hello, is anyone home?" Mina unknowingly asked. "You went full statue for a bit." Katara shook her head and breathed a few more times. "Oh, sorry. She exhaled once again as her eyes finally left the scarred boy. "Thought I saw an old friend." Mina turned around and looked behind their bird friend, a large smirk growing across her face. "Oh, you looking at the hot boy in the back? I noticed him too." Katara glared at her. "I'm looking because he looks like a friend from my home." "Who is he?" "Well, only the hotshot of the school," Mina said with a big smile. "That's Shototodoroki. He got in through recommendations." "Recommendations?" Katara suddenly remembered the room she walked by after the exam, and who she ran into. Her mind started spinning as she looked back to the boy in back. his left side suddenly reminding her of the flame hero. So, that is Endeavor's son? She hesitantly asked. Yep, that's crazy how we have the kid of the number 2 hero in our class, huh? Katara kept her eyes on the boy, now somewhat cautious what kind of person he was going to be. She then noticed the empty seat to his left in the back, her heart beginning to race faster as she began hoping what she thought wasn't going to be true. She then pulled out the small entrance sheet that had been sent to her a few days ago with the school uniform. She looked it over until she found the arranged seats section. Seeing a number 10 there, she looked up to the desks from the left and saw 5 in the row, and the next row there were. You've got to be kidding me. Her desk was in the back row, and right next to this Todoroki. Can this get any worse? She mumbled to herself. Ah, what's your problem? Your old school shove a stick up your ass or something? The sudden shouting from the other side of the room made Katara turn her head, and felt her shoulders slump even more. Now this really did get worse. Tenya was arguing with that same blonde kid she had encountered right before her exam, his mouth curled in a massive grin. Ah, so you think you're better than me? I'm gonna have fun tearing you a new one. Bakugo laughed as he watched Tenya's eyes widen in shock. You'd threaten me, your own classmate. Are you sure you are in the right school? The stunned Ida shot back. Katara rubbed her forehead as she tried to contemplate everything that was happening to her. First she sat next to the son of the man who would be happy with Azula as his daughter, and now she was also in class with that angry kid that threatened to kill her before. What a great start to her school days. Excuse me. Hearing the stutter behind her, Katara turned and was met facing the familiar green hair she had seen at the entrance as well. She then noticed she was blocking the doorway and chuckled. Sorry, I didn't mean to be in the way. She watched as his face suddenly turned a burning red as he spoke to him. You okay? And no, why you are fine? Midoriya buried his face in his arms as he turned away from her, sweat already pouring down his face. Ooh, okay then? Katara just sat in confusion as the stuttering mess in front of her couldn't even look at her. Geez, has he ever talked to a girl before? Ah, so I see you have made it here, too. Tenya came stomping towards the green-haired mop past his friend. I am Tenya Ida. You were in my testing group at the entrance exam. Why, yes, I remember you. Midoriya waved his hands rapidly as his nerves blew through the roof. Midoriya, both you and my friend Katara here knew there was more to the exam. Tenya closed his eyes and shook in frustration to admitting the truth. I misjudged you. As students, you both are superior to me. Katara sweat dropped at her friend's bluntness. You need to work on your introductions, Ida. She then turned to the boy and smiled. As you heard from my friend, I am Katara. And you are Midoriya. Not even able to speak, Midoriya just stood frozen as the blue-eyed girl talked to him. Holy crap, this beautiful girl introduced herself to me, and she said my name. Hey, I remember you. Falling boy. Izuku felt his blood boil in embarrassment as he looked behind him and saw the same girl he saved in the entrance exam, taking everything he could not to faint. 2 cute girls talking to me? High school is so crazy. As the 4 of them talked and introduced themselves, Bakugo's eyes focused on Izuku, a hatred burning inside of his chest. Deku, you little bastard. I don't know what the fuck you did, but I'll figure out how you got in here. He then looked to the tan girl next to his childhood classmate, his teeth clenching tighter. And that bitch? Who the hell is she? She passed me in the entrance exam. I'm not gonna let that slide. Feeling eyes on her, Katara turned around and met eyes with the enraged Bakugo. They both glared at each other, Bakugo sneering and looking away first. Katara took a deep inhale and sighed. She would have to watch out for him. So I really am excited for all this. The young girl Uraraka said as she continued on her happy rant. I'm curious what our teacher is like. This is gonna be so much fun. If you are here just to make friends, you can pack up your stuff now and leave. All 4 of the students by the door froze to the flat and cold voice coming from the hall. Their eyes all turned to see a large yellow sleeping bag. The only thing that told it was a person was the raggedy black hair and bloodshot eyes poking out the opening. It took 8 seconds for you all to be quiet. Time is precious and you just wasted some of it. The tired voice of the man came out as he unzipped the bag. his worn clothes hanging off his body as he walked towards the now silent class. "Hello, I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher," he drearily declared to them all. "Teacher?" Katara questioned out loud as the exhausted-looking man came in. "This guy is going to teach us? He looks like he doesn't even want to be here." Aizawa ignored the whispers the students were giving out to each other as he reached in his sleeping bag and pulled out a blue tracksuit. "All right, let's just do this. Put these on and meet me outside." As she changed in the girls' locker room, Katara looked down at herself as the new blue tracksuit slipped on perfectly over her body. She eyed it curiously as she looked to Mina next to her. "So both our school uniforms and our practice outfits all look the same." "Yep, that's school policy for you," Mina answered as she slipped on her tracksuit. "Didn't your school have the same thing where you went?" Katara turned to the voice behind her, seeing a tall girl looking down at her. Her black, spiky ponytail stuck out behind her, reminding her of a porcupine from her own world. Ignoring the odd visual, Katara shook her head. "Well, no. I didn't go to school here." The girl's eyes widened when she realized who she was talking to. "Wait, you're the exchange student that got first at the entrance exams? I heard so much about you from the others." "You did?" Katara asked. "Yes. Most of the kids are talking about you. It's amazing your score." The tall girl gave a small bow. "Momo Yaoyorozu. Pleasure to meet you." Katara smiled and nodded her head. "Kairi Katara. Same to you. What did you get in the entrance score?" "Oh, mine was different than yours. I was entered through recommendations." Momo responded as she took off her jacket. "Recommendations? You mean you were?" Katara's words faded when she watched Momo remove her shirt and reveal quite the chest for a girl their age. I mean that doesn't matter about who people are, but Katara subconsciously crossed her arms, covering her own smaller size. "Damn, that's unfair." "You okay?" Momo asked. "Oh, sorry," lost in thought for a second. Katara forced a smile as tried to ignore the sight below the girl's neckline. "So recommendations was a different test than what we did?" "Yes, that is where a larger name agency or pro put in their request for certain students to enter UA." Momo clenched her fist and brought it to her chest. "It is now my responsibility to do my best and excel since others gave me this chance." Katara raised an eyebrow at the girl's determination. "Okay, she's Ida if he was a girl," she said to herself as her mind kept going back to that flame hero and what he said to her back then. "So your test was with Todoroki?" "Yes, he was pretty quiet, but had so much focus. He scored at the top of recommendations, I believe." Momo responded. "I see. I saw your score, too. That was for sure something," Uraraka added from the side, already dressed in her tracksuit. "I heard some of the others saw you in action, and you were amazing. I feel like I barely got in, and you simply blew through the test," another short-haired girl with jacks hanging from her ear said. "That's really cool. Kyoka Gyro, by the way?" Katara smiled and nodded. "Thanks, and I." "Glad to meet you too. I'm Hagakure." Katara yelped in surprise by the floating UA uniform in front of her, realizing it was another girl, or what she assumed should have been one there. Hi there. Same here." The final girl in the locker room caught Katara's eyes was one with large buggy eyes and wide mouth. Her green hair hung long down her hunched body. Not wanting to be rude, Katara nodded towards her too. "And nice to meet you, too. I'm Kairi Katara." "Thank you," the girl's raspy voice responded. "I'm Asui, but you can call me Tsu." "Tsu? I'll remember that." Katara smiled and stood up from the bench and started walking out with the other girls. "So what do you think he's making us do?" Uraraka shrugged her shoulders. "I have no idea. These are their suits they use for physical training, but this is only the first day of school." Looking back forward, Katara followed as the other girls exited the locker room to a large outdoor field. Multiple different areas were designated for what looked like a range of different things people could use for training. Just past all of those things were the rest of the other students, all gathered together in front of the tired-looking teacher. She walked over and stood next to Ida in the center of the group. "So has he told you what we are all out here for?" she asked her friend. Tenya shook his head. "No, he has not. I am quite confused as well. If you all would shut up, I can get this over with fast." Aizawa sighed to the chatter. I brought you all here for a quirk assessment test. A quirk assessment test? Most of the students questioned together. Yes, most of you have been doing standardized testing most of your lives, but you were never able to use your quirks in physical exams. Aizawa reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone and what looked like a ball. But here I get to run my class the way I see fit. The ragged teacher walked towards the students and popped his neck. Bakugo, what was your record for the softball throw in junior high? Bakugo raised his eyebrow to the question. 67 meters, I think. All right, now try that with your quirk, Aizawa said as he tossed the ball to the blonde. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle. The spiky-haired blonde walked past the teacher and into the white circle in the dirt, stretching his arms as he looked to the distance. All right, I'll throw a little heat on this and drop their jaws, he grinned as he winded back his arm and whipped it forward. Die. A large blast erupted from his hand, catapulting the ball through the sky. The rush of air reached the other students, blowing Katara's hair back behind her face. Her eyes widened as she watched the dissipating explosion in front of her. Her mind went back to the three-eyed bounty hunter she and her friends faced back in her world, except this kid could shoot those explosions out of his hands like a bender. She took a deep breath and frowned internally. Things just kept getting better. As the ball seemingly disappeared beyond their sight, Aizawa turned back to the crowd. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities. That's the most rational way of determining your potential as a pro hero. He lifted the phone to the class, revealing 705 meters. Whoa, that's crazy. Over 700, a spiky red-haired kid exclaimed. Wow, that looks fun. I want to try it, Mina yelled out in excitement. Fun? Aizawa's cold gaze went to the happy pink girl. You think this is all going to be fun and games here? Not so likely. Today you will compete in 8 physical tests to see your potential. His mouth curled up into a dark grin at the quiet students. Whoever comes in last will have none, and will be expelled immediately. All of the students gasped in shock at the sudden revelation they had learned. Many of their mouths hung open in disbelief. What? You can't do that? It's the first day of school. That isn't fair, Uraraka complained. Fair? The world isn't a fair place for any of you, Aizawa shot back as he stepped forward. I run this class my way. Understand, if any of you have a problem with that, you can leave now and go home. Many of the kids were feeling the pressure coming onto them now, afraid of what may come. But Katara took a deep breath as she clenched her fists. She had her own struggles with her bending master in the beginning, and she wasn't about to let this slow her down. She swallowed hard and readied herself. Test 1, 50-meter dash. The class of students waited in pairs as 2 at a time sprinted down a small track as fast as they could. Katara was standing next to a taller boy who went by the name Siro, and noticed his odd-looking elbows that stuck out awkwardly. She didn't want to be rude though and tried not to stare at them, and instead looked to the track where Ida and Tsu were. And in the next moment, they were off. Tenya of course took the lead, his legs launching him down the track in an instant. She then watched as Tsu hopped across the ground like a large frog, hence what Katara simply assumed her quirk was as well. In a rush of air, Tenya of course finished first with 3:04 seconds and Tsu with a 5:58. Kind of figured he was going to finish first. She chuckled to herself as her and Siro lined up next. The tall boy next to her grinned and crouched into position, pointing his right elbow forward. Hey, no hard feelings about who gets first. Katara simply smiled and popped her canteen open. Same here. At the sound of the timer, they kicked off. Katara immediately bended her water to her feet and rushed herself forward, shooting her across the dirt. Her eyes noticed a weird strip shoot past her body and latch onto the ground ahead. Not wanting to be distracted, she looked straight ahead and kicked harder. She seemingly water skiing over the ground's surface, pushing her body faster and passed the timer at the end first between the two of them. 4:35 seconds, the machine called out. 5:22 seconds. Katara skidded to a stop at them and looked over to her opponent, his face simply amazed at her time. Huh, not bad, he admitted. Thanks, she responded. As she walked to the side, she noticed that Todoroki was next against Tokoyami, and immediately she was intrigued. She stepped to the side and watched as the two of them lined up. Tokoyami has his shadow power, she said to herself as they both crouched down, her eyes focused on the red and white-haired boy. But I've seen how fast firebenders are pushing themselves. When the timer sounded off, however, she was left wide-eyed as Shoto launched forward, and something very different came out from behind him. Ice, she said out loud in shock as Shoto blasted down the line as a trail of ice pushed his body along the track leading the pair. 4:04 seconds. 4:35 seconds. He doesn't have fire, but his father does, Katara said to herself as he walked by her, his face stricken of any emotion. For someone who was the child of a top hero, a powerful quirk, and seemingly had life for himself going, she couldn't help but notice the same look she had seen on her own friend back in her world. One that was always looking for something to fill an empty void in his life. And judging by the scar he received, she was thinking perhaps he had a scolding from his father he would never forget. Maybe he won't be like Azula, she whispered inside, in fact hoping he could somehow be like the person she once knew. She would have to try and talk to him later. But for now, she looked back as more classmates took their turns sprinting down the line to not lose this chance at being cut. And she had 7 more tests ahead of her. What she didn't realize, however, were 2 sets of eyes staring at her. First, Midoriya couldn't take his eyes off of the tan girl standing on the side of the track watching the others run down the line. Yes, she was definitely cute, for sure. Any boy would be an idiot not to have her catch their eye. But there was something else. Something that kept bugging him from the moment he saw her. And when he watched her use the water, it started eating at him more. I don't know why, but there's something about her, he whispered internally, his hand grabbing his chin. But it's like, I've seen her before from somewhere. The other was of Shototodoroki. While he didn't appear to before, he had noticed the stares he was receiving from her. The reason he watched her, however, was the same to Midoriya. It can't be her, there's no way. But, his left fist clenched, eyes narrowing as he watched her, she looks just like her. Test 2, Grip Strength. Holding the odd device in her hand, Katara looked around as other kids began squeezing theirs as hard as they could. Some like the red-headed boy Kirishima suddenly turned his hands into what looked like stone and squeezed, his score shooting up to 223.5 kg. She then turned to Tenya and watched his face turning purple as his cheeks puffed out from his strain. Whoa, easy. Take a breath, she warned him as he continued squeezing. Finally inhaling, he gasped out as his hand finally loosened his grip. He looked down and frowned when his score came up. 75.2 kg. That is very disappointing. Well, your quirk is a speed boost. It can't do your entire body, she said, trying to make him feel better. But if I lack in one field, I should be training harder to compensate for that, he shouted in determination. Katara rolled her eyes at his attitude and patted his shoulder. You take yourself way too seriously. He frowned and crossed his arms. All right, Missy, let us see what you can do. Looking down at her own device, she was about to use just her hand before she noticed Momo had some kind of clamp come out of her skin through a glowing patch. She watched in awe as the ponytailed girl set the item she created and put it on her own grip strength machine. Katara then remembered how Aizawa mentioned to use your quirk to your advantage, deciding to encase her hand in water and wrap it around the machine and squeezed with her left, and simultaneously used bending with the other to magnetize the pressure. After struggling for a few moments, she hit her max and released the device, and both her and Tenya's eyes widened. 254.7 kg? Astonishing, Tenya said out loud. Yeah, I had no idea what it was going to be either, Katara admitted, surprised herself by the score. Crack. Both of their heads turned back to Momo, the girl blushing in embarrassment as her clamp had snapped the grip she had. I'm sorry, Sensei. I can pay for that. Okay, that's not even fair. Katara frowned at the creationist's ability. Test 3, Standing Long Jump. The long sand pit was as basic as it got. Just a big sandbox. Katara watched as several of the kids simply tried jumping and could barely clear half of it. Then there was Bakugo, who seemingly flew across the whole pit. Now that she was up, Katara took a deep breath and enveloped her arms in water. She latched onto the ground several feet in front of her and leaned back against the liquid building pressure. When she was ready, she yanked forward, propelling herself through the air, watching the pit pass below as she started coming down. She reached with her legs and landed with a thud just on the other side of the pit. Phew, closer than I would have liked, she chuckled to herself. She knew others had passed it easily and she barely cleared it. Things were kind of interesting for her. She then caught sight of Midoriya lining up. She watched him brace his legs, waiting for that powerful rush Tenya told her head had, and barely made it halfway in the pit. Did he not use his power? She wondered as she watched the defeated boy crawl off the ground, his face filled with worry. Has he not been using his quirk this whole time? Test 4, repeated side steps. Now these are starting to feel pointless, Katara sighed as she watched Kirishima hopping back and forth over a line. He huffed as he pushed off the ground every time, his face straining as he tried going faster before Aizawa clicked his stopwatch. Time. Frowning at his seemingly low score, Kirishima grunted and stomped off. Man, my quirk is useless for this test, he yelled in annoyance. Next up was someone who looked like he should have been at home with his parents still. The small boy suddenly began popping little purple balls off his head and forming little mounds on each side of him. Katara watched the strange act until the little boy grinned to the crowd. Time to get bouncing, Minta snickered. Katara's eyes widened in surprise as he started whipping between the two stacks he made, having to whistle in amazement as the little guy bounced off each thing. Okay, that is pretty creative. After he was done, Minta smirked and walked off the line past the taller Katara, his eyes taking a sneak look behind to see the girl's back end. You can touch my balls there if you want, but be warned, you may not want to let go. The sexual innuendo shot through Katara's ears like an ice spike, her head slowly turning back to the little pervert. Even Bakugo felt a cold chill run through the air from the look she gave. You want to say that again to me? Minta's lips sucked in so tight he probably couldn't have spoken the rest of the day. Test 5, ball throw. Now they were back to the original test that started the whole thing off. Katara waited behind Momo as she conjured what looked like some sort of cannon, shoving the ball into the end of it and pressing the trigger. Boom. The class all stepped back in shock as the explosion launched the ball far into the sky and disappeared beyond view. Aizawa turned the phone and showed the score. 647 meters? Whoa, Mina gasped. Katara chuckled as she watched Momo move the cannon to the side and out of the way. Now I really would call that cheating. Yayurazu giggled and closed her open sports shirt. He said use my quirk, so I am. Yeah, and now I have to follow that, Katara sighed and walked up to the spot. She grabbed the next ball from the stack and spun it in her hand. Use my quirk, huh, she thought out loud. Pulling a long stream of water from her canteen, she enveloped her entire arm and strung the ball onto the very end of it. She stretched out the water whip far behind her head, taking a deep breath before rushing forward. With a forceful whip, the water snapped forward and ended with a loud crack. The ball rushed through the air down the field, with their teacher once again flipping the phone around. 356 meters. That's a really good score, Uraraka cheered from the crowd. I want to try it next. Katara smiled and stepped out of the way, hoping at least her score would seem impressive for a bit. And then Uraraka threw it. And it kept going. And going. And going. The waterbender's smile completely faded as the entire class sat jaw dropped to the never-ending toss this girl just made. So much for that idea. Geez, I don't think anyone wants to follow that one. Kaminari chirped in as most of the others still murmured in amazement. One was to follow next, and sure enough, it was Midoriya. Katara watched as the boy seemingly sulked towards the spot, his eyes seeming to lack the confidence he needed. She had noticed he was either towards or at the very bottom with every test. It seemed like everything he was trying to do was just by himself and never using his quirk. But no matter what it was, he didn't look like he had a chance to make it. Midoriya himself was feeling the pressure of where he was, but it was for the risk of his new power. He had no idea how to control his quirk yet, but he couldn't stop here. All Might gave me this power so I can become a hero. He did this for me. His eyes burned a new fire as he stepped forward and winded his arm back. He whipped it forward, immediately feeling the surge run through his arm ready to burst out. And I won't let him down. He threw it, but it fell flat under 50 meters. What happened? I was for sure trying to use it that time, Midoriya stuttered in shock. I erased your quirk. All of the students looked in fright and shock as the rags floated up around their teacher's neck, his hair standing on end as well. The icing on the cake was the bright red glow his eyes now had, focused on the terrified Izuku. The judges for this exam were not rational enough, Aizawa coldly stated. Someone like you should never be enrolled here. You erased it? Midoriya slowly asked, but went eyed-eyed when he saw the goggles hanging around Aizawa's neck. Wait, I know you? You are able to cancel out someone's powers by looking at them. You're Eraserhead. Katara felt a shiver run up her back when she heard that. Wait, he can what? Her mind immediately replayed the many times she encountered that Kai blocker friend of Azula's back in her world. The way Ty Lee could come in, hit your pressure points, and take away your bending. But this man simply had to look at you and he could take your abilities away. That was something truly terrifying. But what scared her was the thought if he tried using that on her. Would his ability erase her bending? Or would it not? And then cause trouble for her since others would see she has something else entirely. She took a deep breath and hoped it never came to that. Aizawa kept his cold glare towards the shaking green-haired boy. Look at you, you have no control of your power. Are you planning on breaking your bones and having someone else save you? What? No, that's not at all what I ogged. Midoriya was cut off as Aizawa whipped part of his cloth out and wrapped him, yanking him closer. You are a danger to be out in the field. You use your quirk and then you are useless. You would be nothing more than a liability in battle. Aizawa's brow furrowed as he leaned in towards the terrified student. What are you going to do? Save one person and then be completely helpless and need rescuing? What kind of a hero is that? Releasing his grip, Aizawa's hair and rags fell back down, his eyes blinking and the glow disappearing. I returned your impractical quirk. Hurry up and make your final throw. While the scolding teacher may have seemed harsh, Katara knew if what he was saying was accurate, it would be hard for him to do anything. She looked over to Tenya and nudged his arm. You said he broke his arm during the exam? Tenya nodded. Yes, it was when he punched the robot at the end. A chuckle escaped from Bakugo's mouth to their right, earning a glare from Katara. What's so funny? I bet you Deku there simply broke his hand by hitting metal like a dumbass. He scoffed out. He has always been a quirkless loser. What do you mean? He destroyed one of those large robots during the test, Tenya exclaimed. Bakugo sneered at that statement. You were just seeing things 4 eyes. There's no way that worthless little. Smash. All of them were silenced by the massive shockwave erupting out from Midoriya. Katara's eyes widened as the shockwave from his throw reached her and blew her braid out behind her, mouth agape in both shock and amazement. Whoa, and you said he didn't have a quirk? Every other student was left bewildered as they saw the score revealed. 705 3 meters? That's insane, Kaminari gasped out. Midoriya looked over to his wide-eyed teacher, his face a mix of both pain and satisfaction. Aizawa-sensei, he paused as he clenched his fist, his pointer finger a deepened red from breaking. You see, I'm still standing. Aizawa couldn't help but smirk to this boy's determination. This kid. While they were all impressed, Bakugo felt his hands shaking in a mix of emotions he couldn't even explain. His eyes were locked onto his childhood acquaintance, his blood coming to a boil. Deku, what the hell? Did you just have? Like an enraged bull, the explosion user burst forward, hands out. Deku, you bastard. You've been toying with me this whole time, haven't you? Katara watched in shock as Bakugo rushed past them, seeing the killer intent in his eyes. What is he doing? He really going to attack him? Before she could even say anything else, however, the furious blonde was entrapped in a pair of wraps catching his face and yanking him backwards. What the hell? Bakugo's eyes widened in surprise as he tried to pull at the membrane, but couldn't even budge them. That the hell is this stuff? Quit making me use my quirk, Aizawa shot out as he pulled Bakugo back, his glowing eyes filled with annoyance. It gives me dry eye. Releasing the angered student, Aizawa walked over and stood directly in front of him. Now I don't know what kind of crap you got against each other, and frankly I don't care. But in my class you toe the line, or you can take your backpack and find another school. You got it? Feeling the material release, Bakugo gritted his teeth but kept his mouth shut. His eyes shot a cold glare to the frightened Midoriya. Their eyes locked for a few moments before turning away and walking back to the sidelines. Katara stared intently at the ill-tempered Bakugo as he hunched his shoulders and glared at the ground. She knew he had a temper just by their small interaction, but she saw something else inside him. Something that really made her uncomfortable. She really would have to keep an eye out for him. Test 6, Toe Touch. The last 3 tests were certainly much more straightforward than the other ones from before. The first was a toe touch. Katara raised an eyebrow and looked to the teacher as she casually leaned and grabbed her feet. This is really a test. Aizawa didn't look up from his clipboard as he pointed behind her. You'd be surprised. She turned around and raised an eyebrow to the large, quiet kid known as Koda, the poor guy barely able to reach past his knees. Ah, I see. Test 7, Sit-ups. Next the sit-ups, where everyone simply laid on the ground and did crunches. In the second group, Katara rolled fluidly up and down as Tenya held her feet in place, the punctual teen keeping her updated. 40, 41, 42, 43, 40. That isn't necessary. Katara huffed out between crunches. I'm making sure you do not forget. Focus is very important when. Yeah, that is making it hard. She grunted as she hit 50. Wow, check it out, we got a challenge going on. Mina giggled as she stood to the side. Huh? Katara almost faltered as she turned and looked over to the side, realizing only one other still going in her group, and that was Todoroki. His eyes met hers as they both continued going up and down. A determination set in his gaze. Furrowing her brow, Katara wasn't one to put down a challenge and pushed forward. Her abs were feeling a burn, but she was used to a life of strenuous training and refused to give up. She pushed harder, wincing as she hit 60. Damn, look at her go, Kaminari cheered out. Keep going. Wow, I gave up at 40. Uraraka groaned as she felt her still sore stomach. Grunting, Katara sweated as she forced her body up again, a burning sensation rushing through her stomach. The pain was getting worse, her face twisting in pain as she laid back again. Her eyes wandered to Shoto once more, and watched his own face sweating but still pushing at a decent pace. It seemed like he was struggling but still could keep going, where her pain was getting worse. After 2 more, she felt her abs finally hit her limit, falling back and wincing in pain. She laid there panting, her hand reached up and wiped her damp forehead. She felt a comforting tap on her knee from her friend. That was exceptional, Katara. You ended up with 74, Tenya exclaimed. Katara didn't answer as she forced her body up, gripping her sore stomach and looking over to Shoto who had done 6 more than her. He was breathing hard himself, but his eyes were set at his feet and not shifting. Suddenly, the other students all began chirping in unison to the end results. Now that is a badass way to go out. Nice job to both of you, Kirishima gave a thumbs up to the 2 of them. You were amazing, Katara. That was good. Ribbit. Tsu chimed in. I should have figured the top 2 aces would go head to head here. Mina giggled as she stretched her arms. I doubt I'll get that close, but I'll try. Smiling to all the compliments, Katara forced herself off the ground and tried to stretch the sharp pain out of her stomach. Looking over to Todoroki, she watched as he drank from the fountain on the side. While she did have a bad taste in her mouth because of who his father was, she knew far too well that a child shouldn't be judged for what their parent was. Perhaps she could be the one to break the ice first. Walking over, she bent over and drank from the fountain next to him, getting back up and wiping her mouth. Hey, good job there, she said as he dried off his neck. She gave a small smile waiting for him to finish, but let it fall as he simply looked at her for several moments. His 2 colored eyes never left her before turning around and walking away. Thanks, he quietly answered, not looking back towards her. While not completely blown off, Katara could definitely feel the tension in the air as he left the room and went outside. What was that about? The final test was a simple long-distance run doing laps around the school track. Ida, to no surprise of Katara, easily kept pace at the front of the class, hardly breaking a sweat. Should have expected that with your kind of quirk. Katara chuckled as she kept her own decent pace. You seem to know that Ada pretty well, Mina said as she huffed next to Katara. You meet him recently. No, actually I'm living at his family's home. That was through that program I told you, remember? Katara answered. What? Mina gasped. Living with a classmate? That's kinda odd. Not like I planned that, Katara sighed. It, kinda just happened. Mina lifted an eyebrow, but gave a quick shrug. Alrighty. So, expect this on the first day? Not really, Katara exhaled. You? Heck no. I figured all talking. But this is kinda cool to actually try out our quirks on things. Mina grinned and looked to the others around. And we got some other cool quirks here, too. Looking ahead of them, her eyes found the red and white hair of Todoroki bouncing just after Tenya. Her mind thinking of the ice once again. Yeah, cool. After all the students finally cooled down, they all gathered by the gym entrance where they all started. Aizawa inputted the final scores to his phone and added the averages to the final chart. Now for all of you, most probably have a good idea where you stand. In case you were curious, here are the final results. Waiting in anxiety, a few of the students wiggled back and forth as they hoped their names wouldn't be at the bottom. When the screen illuminated in front of them, there were a few surprises in the rankings. Rankings. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shototodoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Kairi Katara. 5. Tenya Ida. 6. Fumikage Tokoyami. 7. Mizo Shoji. 8. Mishiro Ojiro. 9. Ijiro Kirishima. 10. Mina Ashido. 11. Ochako Uraraka. 12. Koji Koda. 13. Tsuyu Usui. 14. Yuga Aoyama. 15. Hantashiro. 16. Denki Kaminari. 17. Kyoka Jiro. 18. Toru Hagakure. 19. Minoru Mainta. 20. Izukumidoriya. Katara sighed in relief as she saw where her name was. While she was sure she had done better than most, it still felt better to actually know the rankings. Wow, we both did pretty good, Ida, she said to her friend next to her. Tenya nodded to her and grinned. Yes, we both did. Congratulations, Katara. Ida turned back the board and gave a small smile to being towards the top of the class. He was also happy seeing Katara do so well, for he knew she was very talented. But he couldn't help but bite down slightly at seeing her name in the position above him. He wasn't mad, of course, it's just he wasn't exactly sure what he felt. So, you beat me again, he sighed internally. He took a deep breath, clenching his fist and looking down at it. He knew he wasn't mad, but to lose again, it just left an odd taste in his mouth. Time for some more training. Katara looked back to the board and looked at the other standings. With whatever power Yaoyorozu had, it was no surprise she made the top spot. Then there were the other two above her, making her slightly bite her tongue in distaste, but had to admit their abilities were very impressive. Her eyes then noticed the last place spot, and felt her heart ache slightly. Oh no, she whispered and looked over towards Midoriya. She could see the disappointed look in his eyes, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. She couldn't help but feel sorry for him and decided to at least make him feel better. She walked over and patted his shoulder. Hey, I'm really sorry, Midoriya. His eyes slowly turned to her and felt his breath catch in his throat having a girl so close to him. But the pain of seeing his ranking was overpowering that feeling. He looked back to the ground and swallowed. Thank you. It's all right, I guess, he barely stuttered out. Aizawa turned off his projector and looked back to the class. Oh, and I lied. No one is going home today. What? Most of the class screamed out in shock, including Midoriya, who nearly passed out right there. I just figured it would make you all try your best with some pressure. The dreary teacher responded with a grin, just a little deception. Momo looked over to the others and sighed. It was pretty obvious from the beginning, honestly. I should have said something. Katara rolled her eyes and looked back to Midoriya, his face nearly a pasty white from shock. Well, I guess that's a relief now, she chuckled. Midoriya couldn't say anything as he felt a wave wash over his body. One moment he was about to be sent home for completely failing this test, and now he was still here. High school was too much for him. Aizawa put his phone away and walked away from the kids. Now being it's already towards the end of the day, It's not worth going back to class for 20 minutes. So go get changed and head on home. Be ready for tomorrow. IT thought he was going to send he yelped as he gripped his broken finger. Katara looked down to his bandaged finger and remembered him using his power. Wow, it really does hurt him. She then remembered there was something she could do to help a little. Hey, if you want I can help soothe that injury. Midoriya's face turned deep red to her offer and quickly started waving his hands back and forth. Don't worry. I'll go to Recovery Girl and get it fixed up right away. Oh, all right then. Take care. She watched as he quickly turned around and sprinted towards the boys' locker rooms ahead of the others. Watch it, Deku, you annoying little shit, Bakugo screamed out as the sprinting boy ran past him, making Katara glare at him. Hey, what's your problem? She yelled at him. Why do you have something against him? Bakugo stopped and turned around. What did you say? He growled at her. What is your deal with Midoriya? Why are you being such a jerk to him? She shot back at him. He clenched his fists and gave a quick spit to the ground. It's none of your damn business, so why don't you just butt out? He shouted before stomping away. Besides, you should watch yourself. You may have beat my score in the entrance exam, but I already passed you today. Soon I'm gonna be the one in that #1 spot at this stupid school. Katara glared as the unstable blonde walked past the other students on edge from the little standoff they watched, many quite surprised by her attitude standing up to the angry kid. Taking a deep breath, she turned around and walked towards her own locker room, rubbing her neck to relax her nerves. Phew, you got some fire in you, girl. Gyro chuckled as she walked by Katara. Excuse me? Katara questioned. Not many want to say anything to that dude. He's got quite the hot head, and yet you simply called him out. Nice. Gyro laughed and nudged the waterbender's arm. Hearing that, Katara just rolled her eyes. What is his problem? He just looks like he's ready to snap at anything. He may be more bark than bite. Maybe he just needs a good ass kicking sometime. Gyro responded. I think he is just really hot-headed. Sue added with the other girls, like he has never lost before. Hey, good job out there, Momo said as she came to Katara's side. I'm really impressed. Katara chuckled out loud to the compliment, walking inside the doors and sitting on one of the benches. Me? You did the best out there. You were the one who did a good job. Momo smiled but waved her hand. It's nothing special, just using my quirk. Yeah, what is that by the way? Katara asked as she stripped off her tracksuit. You can just make things? Momo nodded. Yes, I can create any item that I desire as long as I know what it is made of. Wow, that's a really neat ability, the waterbender responded. Well, I have to know the molecular structure of the item I am making, and it uses lipids in my body, so there is a limit to how much I can create. Katara raised her eyebrow. Lipids? Momo chuckled. Fats. Oh, okay. Katara's eyes trailed down as Yaoyorozu stripped her own tracksuit off, revealing her near-perfectly shaped body, bringing a small frown to the waterbender's face. So she can simply burn up fat whenever she wants. No wonder she looks that amazing, she thought in slight jealousy, slipping her normal uniform back onto her body. So, what did you all think of today? Uraraka asked happily. I thought it was really cool to see everyone in our class use their quirks. Yeah, I think it's awesome to see everyone go at it, Toru cheered out, her floating shirt bouncing up and down in the air. I hope I don't fall behind everyone else. Katara couldn't help but chuckle as she watched the seemingly floating clothes get removed, leaving nothing but a floating bra in the air. I will say you would be really good at sneaking up on people, but you'd have to take everything off. Steam seemed to rise out of nowhere from Toru's embarrassed face. I know, but it's still so nerve-wracking. But being so sneaky is pretty rad, Uraraka added from the side. Katara couldn't help but smile at the others chatting and joking with each other. So far it seemed like most of her classmates she was getting along with good so far. Of course, there were a few she was a bit hesitant with so far. Maybe it will get better at least, she thought to herself as she slipped on her school jacket. Hey, since we are all here, why don't we exchange numbers? Mina asked everyone. Uraraka's smile grew across her face as she heard that. Yeah, that's a good idea. So if we need help with something, we can just get a hold of each other. Katara froze mid-motion at that. Wait, numbers? She then watched as some of them pulled out their phones, her eyes widening as she remembered the one she was given earlier. Shit, how do I work that thing? Mina finished typing in Gyro's number when she looked over to Katara sitting there. Aren't you gonna do the same? Oh, ooh, funny thing, Katara blushed and rubbed the back of her head as she pulled her own phone out. I just got this today, so I don't know how this works. Hee hee. Mina tilted her head in confusion. Well, if you don't know your new number yet, why don't you just insert ours? Well, Katara looked away to hide her reddening cheeks. I've never actually owned a cell phone before, so I really don't know how it works. What? A few of them yelled in shock. You've never owned a phone? How? Like I told you, Katara shrugged to Mina. My village was pretty isolated. Well, you did, but, Mina scratched her forehead. Wow. Momo shook her head in disbelief. I have to say, I really don't know how I could have gone for so long without having one. Here, let me see that, she asked, reaching towards the waterbender's phone. We can add our numbers to yours and send it to ourselves. Oh, well, okay then, Katara said as she handed the phone over. She finished getting changed as she watched her phone pass girl to girl, each of them typing into it and saying they sent something called a text to themselves. I'll really need to figure out how that thing works soon, she chuckled to herself. After finishing up, Katara made her way out through the school hallways and back towards the main entrance. She eyed the phone in her hand, sliding her finger across the screen as it opened up. She stared in awe as the image changed to a list of different symbols lining the front. Whoa, this thing really is interesting. She had no idea what half of them were, but heard the others mentioning contacts with each other. She then saw one of those items say the same thing, so she clicked on that one, changing the screen to a list of names. She read through the different names that were there: Ashido, Madoka Ida, Tensei Ida, Tenya Ida, Kyoka, Uraraka, Yaoyorozu. She eyed them curiously and clicked on Tenya's name, and another two symbols popped up of what looked like a phone and a letter. Huh, I think that's how you talk to someone, she said out loud and shut it off, putting it back in her pocket. I'll really do have to figure this out soon. She passed through the front doors and saw Tenya waiting there for her, his smile meeting her as she approached. Greetings, Katara, look like it's time to head on home. She was about to answer with a sarcastic, no crap, but her eyes took notice of Midoriya passing by them, his face deep in thought as he walked down the steps of the school. Hey Midoriya, your finger better, she called out to him. He froze mid-step and looked back to her, his face turning bright red again. Why, yes it is, thanks for asking, his eyes barely able to look at hers. You went to Recovery Girl and she healed her finger. That was very wise, Tenya added as he walked over towards the green-haired boy. It is quite fortunate that Aizawa-sensei did not keep his promise of sending last place home today. You are still able to continue your studies here. Midoriya rubbed the back of his head and gave a small chuckle. Why, yeah, pretty lucky I would say. I'm just heading to the train station now. Oh, so are we. Why don't we go together then? Katara happily said next to them, bringing another wave of heat through Midoriya's cheeks. She wants to walk with me to the train station. Oh gosh, he screamed internally. Sure, that sounds good. She chuckled and rolled her eyes, joining the two of them as they all walked down the steps. It was odd why he lied about sending someone home for testing low. Oh, Aizawa-sensei, Tenya responded. I was concerned by his approach after class, but I judge the school's judgment for appointing him a teacher. Yeah, but we are all still here at least, Katara added. Hey, wait up you guys. They all turned to see Uraraka running towards them, a big smile on her face. You all going to the station? I'll join you. Katara smiled as the brown-haired girl came up to them, seeing Midoriya sweating even more now. Yeah, we are. Let's all go together then. Thanks, me and Katara have already introduced each other, but I'm Ochako Uraraka, nice to meet you. Uraraka happily said, eyeing the other two. Let's see, you're Tenya Ida. And you are Deku, right? Midoriya. Deku? Midoriya gasped out, making Uraraka's eyebrow raise. Yeah, isn't that what Bakugo called you? Well, my name is Izuku, But Kachan calls me that when he's making fun of me, Midoriya responded. Katara frowned, thinking back to hearing him that one Bakugo yelling that back on the field. So he's insulting you by calling you that? Despite the others feeling uncomfortable to the reveal, Uraraka simply smiled again. Well, I like Deku. I think it would make a great hero name. Plus, I think it sounds kinda cute. Deku it is. Tenya gasped at Midoriya's sudden change of perspective, his arm chopping in front of him. You cannot simply change on a dime like that. His insult should not be accepted. Katara simply laughed for a few moments at their antics, Tenya looking at her curiously. What is so funny? I think it really isn't a bad name, honestly. And besides, she smiled over to the blushing green-haired boy, it can't hurt if you use it. He looked in confusion to her statement. What do you mean? I mean, if you accept that name as your own, him trying to insult you with it will be pointless. You make it yours, and he loses his strength over you. Midoriya sat silent for a few moments to her words, realizing what she told him actually made so much sense. Over the last several years he had grown so used to hearing the word Deku he simply would respond to it. But he always tried to disavow it when others heard it. Maybe using it for himself would be the best thing he could do. Why yeah, maybe I should. He gave a small smile to the two girls. Thanks. They both smiled as they continued walking together towards the train station. For Katara, her first day of school was quite the interesting one. She saw there was so many new and interesting powers that would have probably made her faint if she saw them the first day she came here. There were a few in the class she was not a fan of so far, but she figured there would always be those few who don't mesh with others. She then looked to her left and watched the other three chatting happily with each other, bringing another smile to her face. She felt like she was making some interesting and good friends so far. Midoriya was feeling the same way. He had struggled for so many years to make friends due to his childhood life. Always the one pushed to the side due to being quirkless, the outcast and unpopular. And now, he was in the greatest school in Japan, and being accepted by the others as friendly equals. His own eyes found their way to Katara, his mind once again scrambling to why it was bothering him. I can't put my mind to it now. But for now, he smiled again as he saw her laughing with Uraraka. I'll think about it later. I have new friends now, and I need to focus on getting better with my quirk. Across Tokyo, the lone Shoto Todoroki made his way down the sidewalk towards his home. His dual-colored eyes were not focused on anything, for his mind was too occupied on the certain classmate he had encountered. He still couldn't believe it, but it seemed like he had completed his search. There is no mistake about it, it is her. He told himself as he walked up to the front door of his place. He opened it up and was met with a familiar face. Oh hey Shoto! His older sister Fayumi yelled out from the kitchen, her white hair streaked with red bouncing as she rounded the corner. How was your first day of school? It was fine, he blandly responded as he took his shoes off. You are home early. Yeah, I finished work ahead of schedule, so they gave me the rest of the day off. She answered, so, you want something to eat? I am fine. I need to do some things now. He nodded and walked towards his room. Oh, by the way, she hesitated slightly, knowing he wouldn't like hearing this. Dad wanted you to call him after school, said he needed to talk about something. Shoto felt his blood boil slightly at the request, his brow furrowing as he continued forward. I'm busy. You know he will be upset, she warned him. Yeah, he sneered as he opened his door. When the hell is he not? He shut the door and locked it behind him. He threw his backpack to the side, taking a breath to calm himself. He didn't care if his old man was upset at him or not, for the bastard was always pissed at something in life. Grunting, he walked over to the computer on his desk and turned it on. Now, let's see that once again. He hissed as he opened up the image folder and scrolled through. Once he found the one he was looking for, he felt his heart jump as his guess was finally confirmed. There you are. He remembered 4 months ago when his father came home more pissed off than usual, the enraged hero smashing several sets of equipment in his training room. Then he came across several news articles speaking of a strange quirk user causing trouble in Hasu, but there was denial from the police and others claiming it to be false information being spread. After a few weeks, bigger stories took center stage, and the rumors had all but been swept away and forgotten. And then, one day, Shoto stumbled across his father's open email and a single document sent to him from the chief of police himself. It was a single image, one that the articles had used, although those were somewhat hazy and not perfectly clear. This was the original and was as clear as any. He had copied it and sent it to himself, and had probably looked at it nearly every day since. It was of his father in the street, his own fire erupting from his fist and colliding with a stream of water. But the water was not what the teen was looking at. His eyes were looking at the one manipulating the water. "I finally found you," he coldly stated as his right hand formed ice over his keyboard, his eyes staring at Katara. Stretching his arms out, Tensei popped his shoulders as he slowly rolled out of bed. He didn't even bother setting his alarm this morning, knowing he had the day off. He made his way out of his bedroom, groaning as he rubbed his neck. He then looked up to surprise at Katara sitting at the kitchen table, her nose buried into her phone. He couldn't help but chuckle at sight. "So you have become more normalized." She yelped in surprise at the sudden voice to her right, her eyes softening when she saw him. "Sorry, was a bit distracted. I thought you were already at work." "I have the day off, but I need to do research into some recent cases." She looked up curiously at hearing that. "New cases? Did something happen?" Tensei felt his face tense up at the question, something she obviously caught on to. "Oh, I shouldn't pry into your—" "No, it's not your fault," Tensei responded with a soft smile. "It's just this one is a little more serious than a simple robbery. I don't feel too comfortable talking about this one." Katara suddenly felt a bit on edge to his choice to hold back. Most things he dealt with at work he was completely open to, talking about what kind of villains he dealt with or the severity of the crimes. Even assault cases he would talk to her and Tenya about. But for him not want to explain this one, she figured it must have been pretty serious. "Okay, no problem. You don't need to talk about it," she answered. He smiled and walked over to the fridge. "So, I got home late last night so I couldn't talk much. How did your first day go?" "It actually went good. We did a quirk test to see how well we compared to the others." He raised an eyebrow at what she said. "And you did well with your quirk?" She rolled her eyes at his sarcasm. "Yes, my quirk worked well. I actually placed 4th. "Oh, impressive," he happily responded. "I knew you would do well. What about Tenya?" "He did really good too. He got 5th. Tensei smirked at her. "You beat him." Katara gave a small shrug. "I mean as an average. He outdid me in several different things though." The elder Ida simply turned and grabbed the milk out of the fridge. "Seems like Tenya has a little competition," he chimed internally, pouring himself a glass. He turned back and looked back to her phone on the table. "So you figure that thing out yet?" The waterbender rubbed her head. Not really. I was looking at different things like messaging and stuff. I'm going to make sure I know what I'm doing before I just send a text, I think." Tensei laughed at her lack of knowledge, in fact feeling a bit jealous. "I have to say, I wish more teens didn't know how to use phones like you. That means they actually need to talk to people." A knock on the door alerted both of them. "Katara, we must get going if we are to make it on time," Tenya yelled from the other side. Looking down to her annoyed face, Tensei just sipped his milk. "Hey, you have to deal with his punctual timing now." "Yeah, I figured that," Katara chuckled and slipped her backpack on. "I'll see you later." "Bye." Tensei watched as she opened the door and exited his place, leaving him alone. Knowing what he had to do now, he let out a deep sigh and rubbed his forehead for a few moments. "No time to waste on this one," he said to himself. He walked into his office, sitting in front of his computer, and opened up the document he had downloaded late last night. The next moment, a gruesome image of blood sprayed across the ground in a dirty alleyway. In the center of the crimson puddle lay the body of a young man, his white and black costume torn in several spots and a deep puncture into his chest. Tensei felt a sick feeling in his stomach as he looked at the corpse, his eyes diverted to the caption below. Pro Hero Banshee slain in Fuketsu. Body discovered after midnight. "This is the 3rd attack recently," Tensei growled as his hand tightened on the mouse. His crimes have been increasing lately. He opened up a map of Japan, looking at the location of the latest victimized hero, and saw they were getting closer towards Tokyo. his eyes focused in a tight glare as he looked back to the dead body above. "Where are you, hero killer?" Making their way down the station steps, Katara and Tenya passed by other students as they all walked towards their destination. "So another day at hero school," Katara said with a smile. "They made us test out our abilities yesterday, so now I am curious on what they will make us do now." "I agree. I usually am always updated on what form of curriculum we would be studying, but UA doesn't advertise their schedule online like normal schools. They only allow those inside during school hours to see the classes," Tenya rambled out. Katara looked back forward at the incoming school. "Well, I guess we are about to find out." "Wow, did not expect this." Katara groaned as she listened to Present Mike going over different forms of grammar. "All right, now which is the correct punctuation to use in a sentence that shows excitement?" The yellow-haired teacher read out to the board class, with only Tenya and Momo actively responding on most occasions. Leaning on her hand, Katara took a deep yawn as she struggled to stay awake. She figured school would have done some basic things like Tenya had been teaching her, but she assumed being a hero school would have been, well, all about heroes. She let her eyes wander around, looking at the other students struggling to keep their heads from falling over. She then glanced over to her left and felt her hair stand on end when she was met with Todoroki staring at her from the corner of his eye. Their eyes held for what felt like a minute, neither breaking as they locked gaze. Katara swallowed as she tried figuring why. The moment she came in class earlier, she did notice him immediately look straight at her from the back of the class. When she made her way to her seat, he never said a word, instead looked ahead and never paid a second glance. Until now. She sat silent for a moment before figuring to break the silence. "I guess we can't always be training, huh?" she chuckled, hoping to get some kind of response. Yet nothing came. Her smile faded as he continued staring at her a few more seconds before he shifted his gaze back forward. She frowned at the action, getting off her hand and leaning towards him. "Hey, you could at least be polite and say something," she whispered. "What good would that do for me?" Shoto coldly responded, not even looking her way. "What?" she hissed at him, shocked by his answer. "What's your problem? I haven't even said anything to you really." Shoto sat silent for a moment as his eyes shifted back towards her, the image on his computer flashing in his mind once more. He took in every detail of her face, and he was now for certain it was her. His sharp gaze looked away as his fist clenched. "You should just focus on yourself. Don't let yourself get distracted." Katara glared and sat up more. "What's that supposed to mean? What are you?" "SHH," Uraraka whispered as loud as she could to the right. "If you keep talking, you'll get in trouble." Katara wanted to figure out his deal, but she sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. She huffed out and went back to looking at the teacher giving his lecture. Peering out of the corner of his eye at the girl next to him, his gaze dropping down to his left hand. "I don't know what really happened that night back then with my father," Shoto growled internally, "but I will be the one to beat you here, Katara." Later in the day, Katara walked along with the others as they made their way into the large cafeteria. Hundreds of other students lined up as they grabbed food from the counter, taking their trays over to the many tables lined inside the massive hall. She looked around for a moment before she found Tenya at a table already seated. She walked over and sat next to him just before Midoriya and Uraraka joined as well. "So, we have survived our first class of UA. Let's enjoy a good lunch," Uraraka cheered as she reached for her beef and rice bowl. "Yeah, let's eat," Katara quietly responded as she grabbed her chopsticks, her tone going noticed by the others. "Is something bothering you, Katara?" Tenya asked. She shook her head and took a bite of her rice, but was caught off guard as Uraraka's hand nudged her shoulder. She quickly swallowed and looked back to the gravity user. "What's up?" I should ask you. You've been glaring at your rice the whole time," Uraraka responded. Katara blushed slightly and sat back. "No, I haven't." "Why, yeah, you have been," Midoriya added. "I thought the food didn't look good to you." Seeing all of them stare at her, Katara took a breath and rubbed her head. "Sorry, it's just that I wasn't comfortable with." "Well, literature is a very important class for everyone though," Tenya happily exclaimed. "If you want to learn how to properly write out documents and—" "No, I'm not talking about the class itself." She waved him off, reaching over and taking a drink of her water. I just felt, does that Todoroki hate me for some reason? Tenya tilted his head in confusion. What do you mean? Did he say something rude to you? No, not really. But, I don't know. Katara sighed and scratched her head. I've barely said anything to him, and he almost seems annoyed when I do. Yet he is always glaring at me for some reason. Well, maybe he is just a little intimidated, Midoriya said to the side. You were close to him in the tests, and you scored top in the entrance exam. Intimidated? She questioned him. Those are just tests. That shouldn't make him act like that though. She grunted and took another bite of her food. It's only the second day of school. He may warm up to you. Uraraka added her positivity to the table. And besides, next class should be more interesting. Sighing, Katara continued to eat her meal, somewhat regretting saying what was on her mind. She made it seem like it was a question she didn't understand, but in her mind she had a guess to what was happening. Her mind went back to that encounter she had after the entrance exams and to what that man had said to her. Maybe you did tell your son about me, she growled, thinking of the flame hero. I bet you did want him to come after me. I am here, coming through the door like a hero. Katara along with the entire class gasped in excitement as the All Might burst through the open door. Her eyes locked onto the man as he marched his way into the room. She had seen him many times on TV, but to see him in person was something else. First off, he was absolutely huge. He was by far the largest man she had ever seen, his bulging muscles seemingly ready to tear through the colorful outfit he had on. Then, of course, his never-ending smile seemed to radiate a warm energy among the class that she couldn't help but smile in return as he stood proudly in front of the others. Now all of you may be curious to what we are doing now, All Might questioned all of them. I am not one to give lessons on normal class topics like history. I am here to teach the basics of being a pro. And today's lesson will pull no punches. Pull no punches? What do you mean? Kaminari asked. Today, we will be doing battle training. Many of the students gasped in shock to hearing they would actually be fighting, where a few like Bakugo grinned in enthusiasm to the idea. Katara herself glanced over to her right and noticed Todoroki staring at her once again, his eyes filled with a determination she hadn't seen in quite some time. Her own gaze hardened as she thought of the idea of having to go against him. But that's not all. One of the keys to being a hero is, All Might's hand held a small remote and he pointed towards the wall, his smirk turning back to the students. Looking good. After he clicked the remote, multiple racks slid out from the wall revealing 20 different cases. Each one was numbered to the corresponding seat in the class, causing more shouts of excitement from the others. Oh wow, that means our costumes are done, Uraraka cheered as she spotted her number. Now let's get you all suited up. Inside their locker room, the 7 girls of class 1 changed into the costumes that they were given. Tsu chirped happily as she slipped into her green latex bodysuit. I really am liking this so far. Ribbit. This suit is made perfectly for me. Katara smiled as she watched the frog girl slip on her goggles on top of her head. You look like you're ready to go diving. It matches you. I know, right? Tsu croaked while adjusting her large gloves. Slipping her jacket off, Katara looked around at the others changing. Uraraka had her own tight latex suit on and her helmet sitting to the side. Gyro's seemed basic enough with a leather jacket and basic pants, other than the strange boots she slipped on her feet. Mina's colorful outfit stood out as well with her fur-topped yellow vest. Momo's also stood out, well, since it left little to the imagination. She then turned to see Toru. Wait, Katara felt her mouth open when she saw a small pair of gloves floating in the air, only accompanied by a pair of shifting boots. You really did go with that idea we mentioned? Well, I always knew I would be a good sneak hero, so I figured go with it when I registered my costume design. The floating glove gave a thumbs up. Now I'll sneak past anything. Giggling to herself, Katara looked down to her own numbered suitcase and opened it up, the contents inside bringing a smile to her face. Gyro noticed the grin and peeked over her shoulder into the case, her eyebrow raising when she saw what was there. Wait, is that a hero coursework? It looks more like it was handmade. It is. It says you can bring your own outfit if you want to. Katara answered, slipping out of the rest of her school uniform. Momo leaned closer as the other girls chatted. You brought your own outfit? How come you didn't have the school design you something? She questioned, her own eyes peeking to the contents. I know, but this is different. Katara paused as she reached into the case, a warm feeling running through her body as she held up her water tribe robes. This has more meaning than a fancy-looking costume. This is something really special to me. Aw, is that an outfit from where you came from? Mina bounced over and looked at the blue robes being held in the waterbender's hands. That's so sweet. Katara smiled and stood up. Yes, it is. Standing outside the tunnel leading to the testing grounds, All Might's grin grew as he watched the 20 future heroes walk into the light. Their grand outfits shined in the sun, almost causing a blinding glow to overtake the street. Now look at you all. You truly do look like future pros, he triumphantly declared as they all lined in front of him. You all look so cool. Now let's get going, you newbies. Looking around herself, Katara glanced at the other students' new looks and was taken back by how catching they were. She didn't want to say it, but even Bakugo's definitely was an eye-opener as he walked by her, his wide grin almost beaming with excitement. She then saw one towards the front that made her double take before realizing who it was. Ida. Wow, now that looks familiar. Tenya turned towards her, his white armor looking near identical to his older brother's design. Even through his covered face, she could feel the massive smile reach her. Katara, I see you have kept your old robes from when you first came here. Yeah, I couldn't ever get rid of these. Besides, these are what I grew up with and the most comfortable. That is very wise, but I am surprised you didn't request some addition to your outfit. But if that is what you want, then all the power to you. As the other students chatted with each other, Todoroki glared through the crowd towards the waterbender, her blue robes identical to the photo that was burned into his mind. His right fist emitted out a wave of frost, his blood running faster as he scowled. You even wear the same outfit you did from then? Either you are pretty stupid at hiding, or are that confident in yourself. He hissed inside, hoping for the chance to finally challenge her. Standing at attention to the gathered students, All Might was ready to continue. Now that you are all here, it is time to explain what is going on. In most cases on the news you see heroes battling villains outside in the city. More times, however, battles are taken place indoors instead. That is where today's lesson comes in. We will be doing 2 versus 2 mock battles. Tsu touched her chin in surprise to the reveal. Isn't that a little advanced for our first testing? Nonsense, in combat you must adapt to situations when it calls. While the entrance exam breaking bots was one thing, but now you are up against real people. Excuse me, but question, Ida interrupted his speech, but are we being split by random or skill? Are we graded on performance? Momo chimed in. How much can we hurt the other team? Bakugo growled. Isn't my cape magnifico? A sparkling Aoyama yelled to the class. Way too many questions, the top pro yelled out in annoyance, his brain overloaded from the kids. I shall explain. The villain team will locate a mock bomb somewhere in the location. You are to defend your stronghold from the 2 heroes coming to stop you. Either the heroes capture both villains or the bomb, and they win, or the villains capture the heroes or time has run out and they win. Now, all of you come and draw to see what your teams will be. Seeing the bucket in front of them, each student came and grabbed a random folded ticket. They never opened it and handed it to All Might, the brawny man reading it himself before jotting down the information. After a few minutes they were done, and he stood back up. Now that you have all drawn your tickets, here are the results. He flipped around the chart to the students to read. Team A, Midoriya and Uraraka. Team, Shoji and Todoroki. Team C, Mainta and Yaoyorozu. Team D, Bakugo and Ida. Team E, Ashido and Aoyama. Team F, Koda and Siro. Team G, Kaminari and Gyro. Team H, Usui and Tokoyami. Team I, Ojiro and Haragake. Team J, Katara and Kirishima. Team J, huh? Katara said as she saw the list created. Hey, looks like we are a pair. Hearing the voice behind her, Katara turned and looked at Kirishima coming her way. His new getup was going practically shirtless other than black sleeves and red shoulder pads along with his face wire guard. She smirked as he approached. Yeah, it seems we are. You trying to show off not wearing a shirt? Hey, a real man isn't afraid to show himself to the world. He grinned and clenched his fist. Now I'm curious who we are gonna face off against. Hearing that made Katara's smile fade, looking back around to Todoroki. His left side was now covered completely in ice, but she could tell through that glass-covered red eye he was looking right at her. Yeah, I wonder who. She mumbled before turning back to the front to their instructor. Now all of you, All Might declared as he dug his hands into two different buckets, the left labeled villain and the right hero. The first to be battling will be these guys. Teams D and A. Both Midoriya and Bakugo gasped out loud to the twist of fate that they would be facing each other, their eyes locking in a split second and sending a tense-filled pulse through the air. Finally, I get to crush you, Deku, Bakugo growled as he hissed through his teeth. Get ready, you little bastard. Katara was too distracted by the tense stare down between the two rivals that she nearly forgot that Ida was up next until he walked past her. Oh, hey, good luck out there, she called out. Thank you, I'll do my best. He responded before walking towards the training building. Her eyes went back towards Bakugo, the fuming bomb boy stomping past his opponents as they both watched him in caution. Katara felt sick seeing him scare them that much, looking to the other two combatants with a smile. Good luck to both of you, do. She waved before turning and following the other students into the large media room nearby. All of the observing students stood behind All Might as the massive screen flipped on, revealing several different smaller pictures. Each image was focused on one of the four combatants to allow everyone a view of the action. Katara walked up and stood next to Mina eyeing Ida and Bakugo discussing something in the bomb room. The monitors unfortunately did not give sound so none of the spectators could hear what they were saying, but whatever it was that Bakugo seemed furious before storming off down the hallway towards the entrance again. He's not even going to work with Ida, it seems, Katara groaned as she watched her friend trying to call his partner back. Mina nodded in agreement. Yeah, he's like a lone wolf. Seeing the chatter, All Might adjusted the earpiece he had giving him access to the speakers set up in the testing room. He could hear Bakugo cursing to himself as he walked. All right, Deku, you've been holding out this quirk on me. You think you are better than me? The top hero watched intently as the angry blonde made his way closer to the two hero kids heading into the building. Young Midoriya did say that Bakugo was always confident in himself, but something seems different here, he whispered inside. A few moments later the class watched as Bakugo burst around a corner and went straight for both Midoriya and Uraraka, his hands glowing bright. Katara gasped as a large explosion overtook the monitor. Did he get them? I'm not sure, the smoke is too thick. Tokoyami responded, his eyes trying to see the others. The other screen showed they did make it out, but now some of Midoriya's outfit was blown off. He sent Uraraka off as he faced off against his childhood schoolmate alone. The furious blonde rushed forward again, but to everyone's surprise the timid Izuku performed a perfect counter and flipped the other and slammed him down. Whoa, check that out, sweet move, Kirishima yelled out in excitement. Once again, Bakugo got up and charged forward, and Izuku was able to counter once more. Katara smiled as she watched him move. He knows how to read others' movements, giving him a good defense at least. Yeah, but that Bakugo doesn't seem like one to let that continue, the large multi-armed shoji added. I don't think Midoriya will be able to keep up that for long. Sure enough, the next moment Bakugo's speed seemed to increase as his attacks came more frequently. Seeing himself outmatched, Midoriya quickly took off down the hall out of sight and around the corner. Bakugo tried chasing him but lost track of his target, leaving the explosion user screaming in frustration. The sight gave All Might a strange feeling in his stomach. Midoriya said that Bakugo thought highly of himself. But this? He paused as he watched the blonde breaking down every door trying to find his prey. This level of pride is something else. There's more going on here that is making this happen. Looking at the other monitors, Katara watched as Ida quickly shifted everything around the room he was in until no other items besides the large mock bomb remaining. The other monitor showed Uraraka coming around the corner, peeking her head out to see Ida guarding the bomb. It seemed Ida was deep in thought of his situation, looking up to the ceiling as he started, what appeared to be fake laughing to himself. Please tell me he isn't actually playing a villain role. She groaned inside, watching him clench his fist and hold it in the air above him. Uraraka must have heard it herself, because she suddenly burst out laughing at the armored teen's actions. Seeing the action made Momo sigh. She had the perfect opportunity to sneak in there, and she let her guard down so foolishly. Yeah, but knowing Ida, I'd be hard for me not to laugh at him trying to act evil. Katara chuckled out. The next moment, the other screens were lit up from another powerful blast as Midoriya jumped out of the way of a shot to the head. Everyone, including Katara to her own surprise, were more drawn into this half of the battle than the one with her own friend. Something about these two was much more than a simple fight. It was something personal. While many didn't know what was going to happen, All Might felt a cold chill as he watched the gauntlet extend out, and a single pin about to be pulled. Bakugo, don't do it. You'll kill him. He'll be fine as long as he dodges. Click. A massive explosion blasted out of Bakugo's gauntlet and rushed down the hallway. Concrete and stone ripped away as the blast tore through everything and tore through the other side of the building. Even the monitor room with the rest of the class shook from the large blast. Katara stumbled backwards as she stared in horror to the powerful blast that rivaled even Combustion Man's power back in her world. She remembered how insane that Hunter's power was to deal with, but it seemed like this teen could match that here. Are you serious? He was trying to kill him there, Katara screamed out as she tried to find her new friend on the screen, looking for the mop of green through the smoke. What kind of move is that thing? That's crazy, Zero yelled as he stood back from the crowd. Eventually, the smoke dissipated on screen, revealing Midoriya with more of his outfit blown off. Kirishima whistled, seeing him okay, looking up to their silent teacher. Sir, don't you think this is getting out of hand? All Might himself was thinking the same thing. For Bakugo to do something so powerful at that range would have been serious damage, or worse if it had hit. He should stop this fight then and there, but what Bakugo had said just moments before caught his attention. Despite his fierce intent, he's not actually trying to kill young Midoriya. But still, he brought the mic to his mouth and turned it on. Bakugo, use that technique again and I'll end this match. Your team will lose. To use something so reckless indoors and destroy the place you are defending is a fool's move, whether you are a hero or a villain. What? You aren't going to stop this? Katara questioned the pro. He's being too dangerous. While he didn't say it out loud, All Might was thinking the same thing, but his heart wanted to see Midoriya push through somehow. On the screen, an obviously frustrated Bakugo rushed once more and leaped towards his target. Midoriya attempted to punch forward, but in a fluid motion Bakugo released a blast forward to distract Izuku. At the same time, the blast pushed him through the air to his opponent's back, giving him a perfect and clear shot to behind. Most of the class began gasping as they watched Midoriya scream in pain from the heated explosion. Todoroki, however, focused his sight on the screen. He doesn't look like a thinker, but he is actually really intelligent, he stated as Bakugo blasted behind himself again to increase his speed. Katara watched helplessly as Midoriya was hit once more by the heavy gauntlets, then grabbed and spun around before being slammed into the stone. Her fist clenched in anger as she watched Midoriya's eyes go blank for a moment. He's toying with him now, she growled. Mina clutched her mouth as she stared as well. This is getting hard to watch. He just has to capture him, not kill him. Bakugo certainly is acting like a villain, Tokoyami added. I don't know what else Midoriya can do. He's completely outmatched here, Kaminari stated bluntly. While she didn't want to agree, Katara couldn't help but watch the way Bakugo moved between his actions. The way his body reacted on instinct, not to mention his raw power and his quirk. When it came to fighting, he wasn't just better than most. He was a gifted natural when it came to combat. She knew well enough to recognize that, and she could see Bakugo was enjoying what he was doing to the poor boy being tossed around. He's not trying to win this, he's simply trying to hurt him. She yelled out and turned to their teacher. Why aren't you stopping this? She could see All Might's body slightly trembling in anger to the sight he was watching with all of them. Why he wasn't trying to disqualify Bakugo was beyond herself. Sir, she yelled out, trying to get his attention. Frowning when he didn't turn her way, she looked back to the monitors as Midoriya faced Bakugo from across the destroyed room they stood in. To her surprise, however, Midoriya's face had changed from what it was before, no longer carrying the look of caution and slight fear from earlier in the match. Now, nothing but pure determination was what he wore, his eyes locked on his foe as they both charged each other at once. This time, Midoriya's right arm seemingly began glowing as he brought it back ready to strike, and Bakugo's hand sparked out another incoming blast. The sight was too much for some of the other students, afraid that it wasn't going to end well. "This is bad, they are going to kill each other, you gotta stop this," Kirishima yelled out in fear. Finally, it had become too much for the hero to watch, bringing the mic up again. "Both of you stop this. Uraraka, now." All Might stopped when he heard Midoriya yell something through his own mic to his teammate, the gravity girl suddenly gripping onto the piling to her side. The moment before the two collided, Midoriya switched his punch and thrust it upwards above, the immense pressure shattering the floors going up all the way to the roof and out. Katara's mouth dropped as the immense shockwave was felt in their room as well, watching the concrete fly upwards just from the wind gust being created by the punch. The upper floor where the other two were was also blown apart, giving Uraraka the chance to lighten the pillar she was holding and swing it like a bat, hitting dozens of rubble pieces towards Ida. With him distracted, she quickly leaped through the air and landed on the bomb, and landing to victory for her team. "Wait, they won." Kaminari mumbled in shock to the sudden change in events. All Might himself watched as the smoke cleared on the monitor where his protege was, his heart sinking when he saw the horrible burns and the broken arm of the young boy. The pain became too much, and Midoriya collapsed to the floor in front of the shocked Bakugo. While it hurt to see, it was over. He had won. Midoriya had won. The hero team wins. After the mock battle and Midoriya was taken to the infirmary, the other three students made their way into the media room with the rest of the class. Seeing Ida's disappointed look made Katara feel sorry for him, putting her hand on his shoulder. "Hey, that was a good match. You did good." She tried comforting him, only to get a sigh in return. "I was a failure at protecting my goal. I should be ashamed." He sulked out, looking over to Uraraka standing there. "Your finishing move was very impressive and it distracted me enough." "Well, I got kinda lucky," Uraraka chuckled and rubbed her head. "If Deku hadn't pulled that off, I would have been toast against Ida alone." Katara shook her head in disagreement. "Well, the big drawback that changed everything was your situation, Ida. For you, you had to work alone." She paused as she saw Bakugo sulking into the room and standing in the back alone, glaring at the violent boy. "You had a horrible partner to work with." Bakugo heard her remark, but the utter shock from the match was too much for him to even look up to her. His eyes stared at the ground as he replayed the last moment over and over again, still unsure how this had happened. His teeth grinded as he breathed heavily. "How the fuck?" he hissed to himself, clenching his fists so hard he lost feeling in his fingers. "How did this all happen? When did you pass me, Deku?" Walking back to the front of the class, All Might stood at attention and held his finger up. "All right, now that the battle is over, who was the one who acted the best for their roles?" Katara was about to speak her mind before Yaoyorozu raised her hand up and began. "Sir, although the heroes won this battle, they took too many risks overall. Midoriya's attack was effective, yes, but the damage it caused was too much and could have destroyed the weapon. Uraraka also cost her surprise attack by being distracted, and her final attack was too reckless if this were real. Now to Bakugo, he abandoned his teammate to go off on his own, and his attack destroyed the base he was protecting. The one who stood out the most was Ida, for he took the responsible approach and kept to his position the whole time." Why yes, precisely," All Might stuttered in surprise to the girl's in-depth analysis. Katara was surprised as well, not able to say anything about Ida herself. She looked over to him. She nearly burst out laughing as she watched him almost cry in glee to the praise. "Don't wet yourself in there, that may rust your armor," she teased as he clutched his chest. "I cannot express my gratitude any more than I am showing," Tenya sniffled as he stood tall. Chuckling, Katara leaned towards Momo and whispered, "Don't give him too much praise. He may never let it go." Giggling at his response to her praise, Yaoyorozu just shrugged her shoulders. "I just tell it as I see it. Learning from your previous battles is how to better prepare yourself later." A certain purple ball boy grinned as he stood behind the two ladies, his eyes locked onto the short yellow skirt of the black-haired girl. You can give all the lectures you want my way. Stare at my ass one more time, and I'll shove my foot up yours. The creationist hissed out, not having to look behind her as he shivered. That was a very good learning experience for you all Might declared as his hands reached into the two boxes again. Now the next teams to battle will be these two. Jay, Katara's eyes widened when she saw her team called. She was a little annoyed she was the chosen villain but figured it was just a test. Her gaze shifted to the other ball and felt her heart rate jump when she saw the other letter. H, she whispered, looking to her right at the two that she would be facing. Both hers and Kirishima's eyes met for a moment as they both turned back to their opponents. Man, this is gonna be a fun one. Kirishima chuckled as he locked eyes with Tsuyu and Tokoyami. Standing outside of the new testing building, Katara and Kirishima held up the earpieces they were given by All Might before they left the media room. She looked over at her partner as he slipped his into his own ear and clicked the button on the side, deciding to follow suit and do the same. Once in, she waited a moment before she did anything. So, how do these work? She asked him while they both walked into the abandoned building. Oh, these things? Just push on this when you want to talk if we get separated. Here, he clicked on the surface button before speaking. Got it. Katara's eyes widened when she suddenly heard his voice not just from outside, but from inside her ear itself. Now that is handy, she chuckled to herself. We may need this against Tokoyami. Yeah, I saw his quirk during the testing yesterday. Seems pretty crazy. He rubbed his head as they continued up the stairs. They eventually reached the room with the large bomb on the third floor. Katara sighed as she stared at the large yet fake device they were protecting. Seems weird we are playing villains, protecting something bad like this. I mean, it's just practice. We can always pretend it's a helpless family stuck here. Kirishima grinned her direction, at least getting a chuckle from her. I guess you're right. Now, we need some kind of plan. She lowered herself to one knee as he squatted down as well. First off, what is your quirk? Mine? It's hardening. Kirishima held up his arm in front of her, the skin across the top suddenly locking tight and appearing like stone. I can harden my body so I can take any hit. Huh, that's a pretty nice one, she responded as she opened her canteen and bended a small amount of water to her hand. I can waterbend, so any water I can control. I saw that during the testing, pretty sweet. Kirishima smiled at the flowing water. She sighed at his compliment. Thanks, but I need a source of water. I can't just create it, so I'm limited to what I can do here, and Tokoyami's quirk is really strong. Yeah, he has that weird thing coming out of him. It's kinda creepy. He calls it Dark Shadow. He told me about it during the entrance exam, and that thing has a mind of its own. Wait, what? His eyes widened at that statement. That is creepy. Well, the problem is that means they have a third set of eyes too, so sneaking around them will be harder. Katara put the water back in her canteen and grunted. I don't know much about Tsuyu though. Kirishima grabbed his chin as he thought back. Well, she's a frog, so I saw she jumps really far, and she's pretty quick too. Rubbing her own chin, Katara wished she actually paid more attention to some of the others more during the test yesterday. I guess so, but if we aren't careful we could. Ah, don't worry about it. Kirishima stood back up and braced his body. Why don't we just rush them and end this early? Yeah, not a good idea, she frowned. If we try rushing them, we may end up like the last team, separated and overtaken. That's why we rush together. Come on, it's more manly than just waiting here, he seemingly begged as he raised his fists up and down. It will look so cool if we just dominate. Rolling her eyes, she stood back up. Fine, we can try and catch them out of this room, but we will stay on this floor and near the bomb at least. We can't leave it defenseless. He grinned at her suggestion. Deal, now let's do this. What are you thinking about? Tsuyu asked as she noticed Tokoyami deep in thought. It's our opponents. Kirishima is pretty straightforward, a brute fighter. It's Katara that concerns me. He answered as they waited outside the building. Tsuyu tilted her head to his comment. What do you mean? She has her water so we know how it works. Yes, and she can also make it into ice. Her eyes widened in shock. Ribbit, really? I didn't see that yesterday. She looked up to the building. She did so well with just water, and she can do even more. Indeed, Tokoyami stood up and stepped forward, his beak forming the smallest of grin. She also beat my score during the entrance exam. This will be very interesting. All right, you newbies, All Might's voice boomed through the street's intercoms. The time starts, now. The cloaked shadow user furrowed his brow and walked forward. Let's go. The eyes in the media room looked between the two teams making their way to their spots, the students already debating the outcome. So, who you got with this one? Kaminari asked the others out loud. I got Tokoyami on this fight. Nah, Katara's taking this herself. Gyro responded smirking. Yeah, she's definitely gonna win. She's so good. Mina cheered on, her eyes also going to the red-haired boy on screen, a small smile forming on her face. Plus Kirishima is really tough too. That's a strong team. Tenya nodded in agreement. They both are very formidable, especially Katara. But Tokoyami seemed quite strong himself. Not to mention he has a Sui with him, too. Momo stepped forward and crossed her arms. Yes, she seemed quite talented too. Katara's abilities with Kirishima's strength are good, but you have a balanced pair with Tokoyami and Tsu. This will be an interesting matchup. I am not fully sure who will win this one. As the class chatted among themselves, Todoroki glared up from the back of the room. He had hoped to be matched up with her now, but luck wasn't on his side. His gaze stayed on the blue-robed girl on screen, watching her crouch behind a corner. Don't disappoint me now, Katara. I need to be the one to beat you. Peeking around the corner she hid by, Katara looked down towards the stairs below. Her ears were poised and ready, trying to hear anything coming up her way. She reached up and clicked the piece in her ear on. Kirishima, you hear anything yet? No, not on my end. The earpiece rang out. I got nothing so far. Keep yourself ready. There are only these 2 sets of stairs coming up here, so they have to come through them. She responded before clicking hers off. She popped her canteen open and readied a large hand full of water out and over her skin. She looked down once more as she suddenly heard the tapping of footsteps coming from below. Hey, I got something, she quickly whispered into her mic, standing up and taking a deep breath. I hear them coming. Over on Kirishima's side, he nodded his head and stood up. Got it, on my way over to. He paused as he heard tapping coming from his stairs as well. Wait, I hear them here, too. What? Katara questioned. They separated too? Yeah, that means we can take them each one-on-one. He happily cheered and faced the stairway, his body hardening all over. Let's get him. Katara's eyes widened as she heard him yell both in the mic and down the hallway. Wait, don't just rush forward. Something doesn't feel right. What's wrong? Afraid of a little action? I'm going in. Wait, don't. Katara could hear him cheer in her ear as he stomped down the stairs on his side. With Tokoyami, I doubt he would. Her mind suddenly remembered the day of the entrance exam and how far the shadow in Tokoyami's body reached out from inside his body. She looked back towards the stairs and saw the outline of a shadow moving by, and the shape of the shadow looked like some form of snake bird. Her eyes widened when she began guessing what had happened, sprinting down the steps and looking to the left. She caught the glimpse of dark shadow retracting back down the hall towards the other side, which was where the other stairs were. Shoot, Katara hissed and ran back up the stairs, hand pushing against her ear. Kirishima, they used dark shadow on my side for a sound diversion. They both are on your side. Kirishima didn't hear, however, the redhead yelling too much as he charged onward. Time to show what a real man can do, he grinned when he reached the bottom of the stairs and locked eyes with Tokoyami. There you are, let's get it. Roaring out, the hardened Kirishima ran forward, hand drawn back and swung, only to find his forearm wrapped in a long tongue. What the? He trailed the pink tongue up the side of the wall, his mouth dropping in shock at Tsu clutched to the side below the ceiling. Where did you come from, Tsui? He yelled out. You should call me Tsu, she mumbled out and yanked him backwards and threw him against another wall. Thankfully for his hardening, he hit the concrete with no damage himself, but was helpless as dark shadow launched out from his body and prepared to crash into him. Before he was hit, A stream of water wrapped around his waist and yanked him back up the stairs, landing in a thud. I told you to wait before running down, Katara growled, releasing the water from her partner. Kirishima glared and stood back up. Hey, how was I supposed to know they were both there? How about wait until I was for sure, not run out like an angry moose lion? I didn't just... Kirishima's face went blank to what she compared him to. A what? She rolled her eyes. Never mind, just stay together. She looked back as she heard their footsteps getting closer. Let's get back, we need to rethink this. Not a fan of running away, Kirishima sighed and nodded. Fine, let's go. As they both sprinted away, Tokoyami grunted and retracted Dark Shadow back into himself. Our first plan didn't work. Katara foiled that one. Yeah, I thought it would give us plenty of time to catch one of them. Tsu responded. Kirishima ran right into it, but she still saved him. Indeed, now we do not have the element of surprise. Facing them head-on here is our best option. Ribbit, are you sure? We cannot waste time. If we don't capture them or the bomb, we will lose. Tokoyami ran up the stairs and glanced down the hallway, seeing them out of sight. He looked back and forth between the many doors, noticing several were cracked open. Let's go, Dark Shadow. The shadowy mass exited his body, the dark hand giving a thumbs up. Got it, it hissed out and rushed towards one of the jarred doors and slamming it open, peeking inside quickly but saw no one there. Backing out, Dark Shadow went towards the next door and hit it open too, but was once again met with no one there. Where are you hiding? Tokoyami glared down the hall, searching for his prey. He was so focused that he didn't notice the closed door behind him slowly opening. Peeking through the crack, Katara watched as Tokoyami walked down towards the bomb room, but not before checking all the open doors going that direction. Slowly reaching up to her ear, she clicked the piece and whispered as quiet as she could. He's almost there. A few more seconds. Then, Dark Shadow reached the last open door on the right, the shadow bringing its fist back to punch it open. Now. The door to the left of Dark Shadow burst open as Kirishima Bull rushed the dark mass and tackled it into the adjacent wall. Gotcha now, the hardened teen yelled out in glee, his arms locked around Dark Shadow's neck and pinning the creature. Hey, that hurts, the shadow yelled out in frustration. Tokoyami tried retracting the shadow into him, but the sturdy Kirishima held tight. Grunting, Tokoyami ran forward. Hold on, Dark Shadow, I'll be right. His words were silenced as the door behind him kicked open and Katara burst out into the hallway. Her hands pulled out a pair of water spheres and smiled. Nice work, Kirishima, now we got you. She prepared to throw the water forward, but the sudden yank on her ankle made her scream in shock and fall onto her stomach. Kirishima's eyes looked up from the shadow to his downed partner. Hey, you okay? Oh, whoa. The second of distraction was enough for Dark Shadow to break free of the grip and throw off Kirishima, the shadow retracting back to its owner. Ah shit, this isn't good. The redhead groaned and rubbed his head. Katara tried to stand up, but she felt something tugging her back by her ankle again. She looked back around and saw the frog girl's tongue wrapped around her leg. Got you, Katara. Ugh, that's so gross, Katara screamed inside as she whipped water backwards towards Tsu, forcing her to release her tongue and jump out of the way. Now free, Katara stood back up and faced the crouching frog girl, while to her back Tokoyami eyed her and his shadow kept watch on Kirishima. Great, so much for that plan, Katara moaned out as she gathered more water onto her right arm. Now that their surprise on Tokoyami was foiled, they had no choice but a full frontal attack against the two of them. Kirishima, you can't let them past you no matter what. Yeah, I got it, Kirishima yelled out, bringing his arms across his front and rehardening. No one is getting through me. Looking back to Tsu, Katara watched as she slowly moved in her crouched position. While she saw her hop around like a frog, she honestly didn't expect the tongue to come along with it, adding a gross factor and a combat factor to the table. So she also has range like me and Tokoyami. This is really a tough spot now. She sighed inside as she looked to her canteen, annoyed by her limited supply. Don't have too many options here. Crawling forward, Tsu let her tongue hang out slightly as she stared down the waterbender. Ribbit, you okay, Tokoyami? I'm fine, thanks for the assist. The shadow user answered calmly, glancing to Katara. It seems I was the one needing rescuing today. Katara chuckled at his joke. You still holding that entrance exam stunt over me? His beak made a small grin. No, but I am impressed with your plan. However, we will be victorious today. Oh, is that so? The waterbender pulled another stream of water to her left hand. Let's find out then. Throwing her hands outward, the water whipped out towards the other two, but they both jumped out of the way in time. Kirishima rushed forward and crashed into Dark Shadow's body, but this time the dark mass matched his strength and pushed back. With them locked together, Katara turned back towards Tsuyu, who now crawled along the side wall. She threw a stream of water out to catch her, but once again the green-haired girl leaped out of the way in time. She's really fast. Katara groaned and split the water on her right hand into 4 smaller streams and whipped them outward. Now the many whips were too much for Tsuyu to evade forward and forced to retreat backwards while shooting her tongue backwards. Not wanting to get grabbed again, Katara yanked the water back and made a thin but wide wall of water surrounding her front and stifling the pink appendage. Ribbit? Tsuyu croaked in surprise as her tongue was suddenly gripped by the water and pulled forward. She dug her webbed shoes into the ground trying to fight back against the force, but the water was too much and was overpowering her. Kirishima, however, was struggling as the larger shadow began pushing him back, his feet scraping across the hard floor. Hey, this bird thing is a bit much for me, he grunted out as he felt himself suddenly picked up off the ground. Shit, shit, shit. Katara whipped her head around and watched her partner smash into the ceiling stone. Kirishima, she yelled out as Dark Shadow retracted alone and rushed towards her. Panicking, she let go of Tsuyu and brought out the little remaining water she had, forming a small ice wall around her backside just as the clawed hands smashed into her shield. She gasped in shock from the force as she was shoved back into the wall behind her, the stone crumbling from the force. I've got her, go to the bomb. Tokoyami yelled out to his partner, pushing the ice harder and into the wall. Wincing at the pain in her back, Katara watched as Tsuyu hopped off down the hallway to the bomb room. She looked back to the dark claws pushing at her, the thin ice beginning to crack. I gotta do something quick, she yelled at herself. Swiping her one free hand, she melted the entire ice shield into water and shot it up Dark Shadow's body and around its neck. Hey, back off, girl, Dark Shadow hissed out as it felt the cold water engulfing its form. Dark Shadow, return. Before Tokoyami could retract it inside, however, the water refroze and locked it in place. The bird-headed teen gasped as Katara suddenly leaped over the ice and knocked him to the ground. Seeing his quirk locked down, Katara looked down and saw Tsuyu nearing the final turn to the bomb. Shoot, don't have much time, she yelled as she jumped off Tokoyami, leaving him free but Dark Shadow still frozen in the block. She only had a handful of water left, but she had no choice since it kept him at bay as she sprinted after Tsuyu. Dark Shadow, you okay? Tokoyami crawled off the ground and ran to his quirk. Can you get free? I am trying. The shadow shivered out as it chipped away at the ice. Gritting his teeth, Tokoyami hit his own earpiece and turned back around. Tsuyu, Dark Shadow is down. She's right behind you. Ribbit. Tsuyu flipped her head around to see, her eyes widening as a small ice spike whipped past her face into the nearby doorway. She skidded to a stop and faced the incoming waterbender. You are very hard to stop, aren't you? She croaked out and launched her tongue out. That's still gross, Katara hissed inside as she took the very little water she had left and made water gloves for her hands. She batted away the tongue as it came in, swiping it with her covered hands and releasing mini ice crystals onto it as it came in every time. The chilled feeling became too irritating for Tsuyu, retracting it back into her mouth and jumping through the final door. Katara cursed as she knew where that led to. Shit, she's in the bomb room, Katara yelled at herself as she reached the doorway herself, retrieving the ice spike she sent earlier and enter the final room, only to find the bomb and no girl in sight. What? Where did she? She yelped out in shock from the sudden force dropping down from the ceiling, knocking her down to the ground. Her eyes spun around to meet Tsuyu, the clever frog hiding above the doorway for her. She tried to crawl away real quick, but the long tongue wrapped her ankles and drug her backwards. Sorry, Katara, Tsuyu mumbled as she pulled out her line of capture tape, but I don't want to lose. Yeah, me neither. Katara flipped her body over and swiped her finger. A single strip of water flying through the air and slicing the capture tape and part of Tsuyu's cheek. The sudden sting made her yelp out and loosen her grip, allowing Katara's ankles to be freed. Before Tsuyu could pull back fast enough, a splash of water hit her chest and soaked her upper body. The cold breath of the waterbender quickly followed suit, and the wet outfit on the frog froze over her body. Ribbit, Tsuyu felt her entire body go numb as the temperature suddenly dropped around her, her eyes drooping down and falling to her side. Her breathing slowed as her heart rate began dropping. So cold. Katara stood up panting as she tried catching her breath. Now that's finally done. She shook her empty canteen and sighed. I got to get more water somehow. This was much harder than. Her words caught on her tongue when she looked back up to the door. You gotta be kidding me. Thought I was down for the count? Tokoyami grunted as dark shadow came out from his chest. I told you I was going to win. Stepping back, Katara felt her heart race as she had nothing left. Whatever water she had left, she used it to keep Tsuyu contained, and everything else was down the hall. She had nothing left. Tokoyami slowly walked towards her, opening his cloak and bringing his own arms out. Now, it's just you and me. Nope, me too. Tokoyami yelled out in pain as he was blindsided by Kirishima, making Katara's mouth drop as they skidded to the floor. You're back. The redhead stood up and was covered in scuffs all over his body, but still grinned over to his partner. I told you I can take any attack. Now, I want some payback on that bird. Tokoyami glared as he crawled to his knees, his body aching from the force of the rock like teen hitting him. You are quite the stubborn one, aren't you? Kirishima smiled and clenched his fists and charged forward. I'm just doing what any hero would do, and that is not giving up. Hearing those words made Katara smile, and even without water, she ran forward to help him. All right, we got this. Gritting his teeth, Tokoyami stepped back and braced his legs. Dark Shadow, go. Katara's eyes focused as Dark Shadow rushed towards her, quickly sliding underneath the shadow as it swiped at her. Before the dark mass could turn to get her again, Kirishima brought a powerful uppercut into its stomach. That's for the ceiling earlier, he yelled out and hardened his face and gave a headbutt into the creature's beak. Tokoyami was about to rush forward to help his quirk, but was caught by Katara's leg sweep and fell backwards. Not giving him time to recover, Katara jumped on top of him and wrapped her arms around his chest, pinning him down. She quickly flipped her body sideways and threw her legs across his chest, pinning his right arm between her thighs as she tightened her arm bar. She could feel him wincing from the pain, but he still was trying to roll over and slip out. Kirishima could use some help, she grunted out against Tokoyami's strength. I'm a little busy, Kirishima yelled as he boxed with the shadow bird, trading blows. Use your water to freeze him. I'm out, Katara gritted her teeth and pulled harder, feeling her face turning red as she strained to keep her hold on him. After a few more moments, it seemed her grip was beginning to weaken, her arms growing somewhat numb as Tokoyami continued to pull back against her. She grunted and tightened her legs even more, not giving him an inch to spare as she yanked his arm flat against her stomach. She refused to let go even when his free hand tried clawing at her legs to break the hold. She pulled harder and harder, her determination giving her every ounce of strength she could muster. And then she felt him tap her calf. I surrender, Tokoyami moaned out between his grunts. The loud bell suddenly rang through the building, signaling the match was over. Sighing in relief, Katara slumped off her opponent and panted for air. Kirishima followed suit and dropped back on his butt. It's over, he got out between his own gasps for air. The villain team wins. Katara managed a large smile on her face as she laid back on the ground, breathing hard. Yeah, it is. Hell yeah, that was awesome. Kirishima threw himself on his back and laughed. Now that was a fight. Tokoyami grunted in frustration as he retracted Dark Shadow back into his body. He sat up and gripped his arm, his muscles aching from the intense strain, but nodded his head. It seems you got the better of us. Congratulations. Catching her breath, Katara sat up and chuckled. It was pretty close. You almost had us a few times. She turned around smiling to Tsuyu. You did good, too. You are very... Her breath caught in her throat when she saw her. However, Tsuyu? The girl in question sat silent on the ground, her body not moving other than the slight shiver she gave every few moments. Katara felt concerned and crawled over to her. "Tsu? What's wrong?" She put her hand on her shoulder and was shocked by what she felt. "You're freezing." "What?" Kirishima stood up and ran over to the two girls. "She has ice on her chest, that's probably why." "Yes, but I haven't seen this before." Katara waved her hands and melted the ice off of Tsu, but the unconscious girl still didn't move. Her body feels like it's just as cold as the ice. "She's part frog, that means she's cold-blooded," Tokoyami yelled in fear of her safety as he ran over to them too. The ice chilled her too much. "She's going into hibernation." "What?" Kirishima's eyes widened in fear. "Let's get her to recovery, girl, quick." "No, I can help her." Katara gathered the water she removed from Tsu and covered her hands. She was hesitant showing this ability, but her guilt was growing as the girl below her hardly breathed. "I did this, so I should fix it at least." Kirishima cocked his eyebrow at her statement. "I know you feel bad, but it's cool. Let's just get her to the infirmary and she'll be." Both of the boys' eyes went wide when Katara's water-covered hands began glowing a shimmering blue. They watched in awe and shock as she placed her hands on Tsu's chest, the shining water running over and enveloping her numb body. The bird-headed teen leaned closer as he stared at the waterbender's act, her hands slowly moving over Tsu's torso. "What is that?" "I'm using my water to recover her temperature. I'm warming her up back to normal." Katara answered with a small fib as her hands went over Tsu's cold chest, healing her. She could sense the internal organs were very slow in response, but they were beginning to move faster as she warmed. After a few more seconds, the green-haired girl's eyes opened up. "Ribbit," Tsu moaned out as she looked up at Katara. "What happened?" "You were out for a little while. Katara restrained you with ice and you passed out," Tokoyami answered. Tsu's eyes widened as much as she could to hearing that. Really?" "Tsu, I'm so sorry," Katara whispered as she continued her treatment. "If I had known this would have happened, I wouldn't have left the ice on you." The groggy frog sat up slowly, a slight shiver running through her body, but as bad as before. It's okay. You didn't know." Tsu's eyes went down to the glowing hands hovering over her body. "You helped me warm up." Katara smiled at her. "Yeah. You feel better now?" Thanks." Tsu rubbed her head as she blushed slightly. "I still feel bad I got beat so easily." "Well, to tell you the truth, it wasn't so easy," Katara chuckled. "You are really strong too." "Thanks, Tsu winced when her hand rubbed the slice across her cheek, looking at the blood on her fingers. "You did get me good. Here, let me get that." Katara brought one of her hands up and placed it over the cut, the glow starting up again. Tsu felt a strange sensation as the water shifted over her cheek, yet it was so soothing at the same time. A few moments later, the glowing stopped, and Tsu brought her hand up to where the cut was and found nothing there. The cut was healed. Kirishima felt his jaw drop slightly at everything that just happened. Now that is some cool shit right there. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Dragonfire 217 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.